The phrase mean world syndrome sounds like something out of a dystopian novel, but it was coined by George Gerbner, a communications scholar in the 1970s. He was studying the effects of television and found something striking. People who watched a lot of TV believed the world was more violent, more dangerous, and more hostile than it really was. It wasn't just that they were off on crime statistics. They carried a whole mindset. They saw strangers as threats, cities as unsafe, and the future as bleak. Gerbner called this pattern mean world syndrome. At the time, he was looking at network television, the dramas and news reports broadcast on a few major channels. But the concept has only grown more powerful. Today, we live in a media environment far more intense than Gerbner ever imagined. 24-hour cable news, social media, algorithms that feed us whatever gets the strongest reaction. Fear has become a constant companion, and it is profitable. So mean world syndrome is no longer just a media curiosity. It's a psychological reality. It shapes how we feel, how we relate to others, and even how we vote. Understanding it is about understanding the architecture of perception itself. Why do we believe the world is worse than it is? Why do frightening images stick so deeply? And what happens to us when we live under that cloud of fear? Let's trace the roots, the emotional costs, the way it is transformed in the digital age, and finally, how we can push back.
Hello and welcome to The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. RJ Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Gerbner's larger idea was called cultivation theory. The premise was simple. Media doesn't just entertain us, it cultivates a worldview. Over time, the stories we see build a map of what reality looks like. Psychology helps us understand why. One piece is called the availability heuristic. That's a mental shortcut described by Tversky and Kahneman. We judge how common something is based on how easily examples come to mind. If you've seen 10 crime reports this week, robberies feel common, even if your own town is safer than ever. Another piece is negativity bias. Human beings are wired to notice and remember threats more than positive events. A violent assault grabs our attention in a way 100 small kindnesses won't. This is adaptive for survival. But in the media environment, it means frightening images lodge deeper and last longer. Then there are schemas. Schemas are the mental frameworks we carry. Once you have the schema that, quote, the world is dangerous, end quote, then everything you see is going to be filtered through that schema. A local crime confirms it. A story about political corruption confirms it. The schema becomes self-reinforcing. Even contradictory data bounces off. Put these biases together, and Gerbner's findings make sense. The more television you watch, the more convinced you become that the world is mean. Not just misinformed, but convinced. So what happens when fear saturates daily life? Well, psychologists begin to see several patterns. First is anxiety. Believing the world is dangerous keeps you in a state of hypervigilance, always scanning for threats, always on edge. That kind of constant alertness is exhausting. It drains energy, it fuels stress, and it harms your health. The second thing we notice is distorted risk perception. Studies show heavy TV viewers overestimate their chance of being victims of violence. Parents become afraid to let children walk to school alone. Adults believe crime rates are exploding when in reality they may be falling. Emotion beats statistics every time. And the third thing we notice is the erosion of trust. If you think strangers are threats, you avoid them. If you believe institutions are corrupt, you withdraw from them. Communities rely on trust, what sociologists call social capital. Mean world syndrome chips away at that, piece by piece. And fourth are the political effects. Fear makes people more willing to support authoritarian leaders, harsher punishments, and tighter controls, even at the expense of their own freedom. Politicians and media companies know this. Fear mobilizes, fear sells. And they are adept at using this to their advantage. Finally, at the individual level, fear can create helplessness. Psychologists use the term learned helplessness to describe what happens when you believe nothing you can do can change your circumstances. You stop trying. You retreat into cynicism, disengagement, or passivity. Living in a mean world is exhausting. Eventually, people give up.
What does it really mean to be human? The Psychology of Being Human, an authoritative guide to mind, emotion, and meaning, is the groundbreaking new book by RJ Starr. Already critically acclaimed for its clarity and depth, this book goes beyond pop psychology and quick fixes. It's a comprehensive guide to the mind, to the emotions that drive us, and to the meaning that shapes our lives. Starr connects powerful psychological insight with everyday experience, showing how understanding yourself also changes the way you see the world. The Psychology of Being Human is more than a book. It's the definitive reference for anyone who wants to live with greater awareness and deeper understanding. Get your copy of The Psychology of Being Human, an authoritative guide to mind, emotion, and meaning by RJ Starr. Available now wherever books are sold.
Now, when Gerbner studied television, there were only a handful of channels. Today, the same patterns he saw have exploded into something far larger. Cable news pioneered the 24-hour cycle. News producers had to fill airtime, and fear was the most reliable way to hold attention. If it bleeds, it leads. Wasn't just a newsroom joke, it became a business model. If it bleeds, it leads. Now, the internet accelerated this. Social media took mean world syndrome into new territory. Algorithms amplify whatever gets clicks. Fear, outrage, and hostility spread faster than nuance or calm. Doomscrolling became a daily ritual during the pandemic. Constant feeds of crises and catastrophes convinced people that collapse was imminent, even when their daily lives remained stable. Social media also collapses distance. You can see a school shooting in another state, a bombing across the world, or a wildfire thousands of miles away, all in real time. Now, the brain doesn't easily distinguish between local and distant threats. If you see it, you feel it. The scope of what you emotionally process has grown far beyond what humans were designed to handle. And then there's the reward system of online life. You see, conflict gets attention. Outrage is shared. Posts dripping with hostility spread the farthest. Platforms reward adversarial posture. The result isn't just fear of crime or disaster. It's a belief that society itself is hostile and that everyone else is an opponent. Gerbner worried about a culture of fear from television. He could not have foreseen how much worse it would become once fear was woven into the very mechanics of digital life. You can see mean world syndrome all around. The parent who insists their child can't walk alone in a safe neighborhood, convinced abductions are common. The older adult glued to nightly cable news, convinced crime is higher than ever, even when official data shows decades of decline. The doomscroller who spends hours immersed in stories of collapse, war, and scandal, then feels as if the world is unraveling everywhere. These aren't isolated quirks. They are the expected results of constant exposure to fear-driven media. Now, if mean world syndrome is cultivated, it can also be resisted. The first step, awareness. Media literacy matters. People need to know how perception is shaped and how biases like availability and negativity work. When you know your mind's tendencies, you can push back. You can push back. Second is conscious consumption. Limit exposure to fear-driven feeds. Diversify your sources. Balance news of problems with sources that include solutions and context. Curate what enters your mental ecosystem. The third is anchoring in local reality. Most of daily life is defined by community, family, work. Investing in local relationships builds trust. And trust is the antidote to suspicion. When you know your neighbors, the world feels less mean. Fourth is building emotional granularity, the skill of distinguishing between different feelings. A disturbing headline doesn't always need to be labeled fear. Sometimes it's sadness, sometimes anger, sometimes empathy. Naming emotions more precisely prevents everything from collapsing into generalized anxiety. And finally, societies can choose to support healthier forms of media. That's the hardest step because fear sells. But public interest journalism, constructive storytelling, and platforms that don't reward outrage are ways to push back collectively. Mean world syndrome is more than a theory from the 1970s. It is a lens through which millions of people now see their reality. It makes the world feel harsher than it is. Yes, of course, dangers exist. Yes, violence happens. But the world is rarely as cruel and as threatening as the screen suggests. Most lives are made up of ordinary moments, everyday kindness and quiet stability, routines, structures. Those things don't make headlines, but they are what people actually live. Gerbner warned us that when fear becomes the default, democracy will suffer, communities will weaken, mental health will erode. His warning has only grown more urgent in the age of algorithms. Resisting mean world syndrome isn't about denial or naivete. It's about reclaiming perception. It's about remembering that while the world contains cruelty, it also contains decency, stability, and care. If we forget that, we live in shadows. If we remember, we create space for trust and hope. How we see the world is shaped not just by what happens, but by how we take it in. Mean world syndrome shows what happens when fear hijacks that process. Resisting it is not just a media task, it's a psychological task. And it starts with the decision to see clearly.
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.